Waymo is growing faster by the day as it's now being added into more cities this year. Let's get right into this. Things are getting interesting with Waymo and self-driving cars because Waymo expands to more cities. If I go quickly to Waymo's site, you can see right now it's only in 3: Phoenix, San Francisco, and LA. So very, very small. But I get on here and I see Austin and Atlanta. In addition, I've mentioned this in a previous video when I covered this, we'll see you on the Uber app soon. So Uber's now being integrated with Waymo. If you order an Uber, you could get an Uber, as we typically think of an Uber ride, but now you could also get a Waymo. We'll talk about that a bit later. And then, of course, Miami. So it's interesting that Waymo's not only getting into these areas or new cities via the app, where you order a Waymo like you order a normal Uber or Lyft, but it's also being integrated with Uber in some instances, in Austin, for example, where you go to order an Uber normally, but you get a Waymo instead. So going here, you can see that self-driving cars are slowly becoming less dystopian and more real world as companies like Waymo, the driverless arm of Google parent Alphabet, expand into more cities. The company plans to add more locations to its roster, eventually opening up to riders in places like Atlanta and Miami, like I just said. In addition, this is kind of weird. Waymo will also be testing with manually driven vehicles in 10 new cities this year. See if I can open this up. See where it is exactly. Las Vegas, San Diego, etc., etc. And the vehicles will be manually driven, and the testing operations are not necessarily a precursor to the launch of a commercial robo-taxi service. Rather, the Alphabet-owned company views these as road trips as an opportunity to see how well its self-driving systems adapt to new locals with varying weather conditions and regional driving habits. That's kind of interesting. So Waymo's starting to do a lot, right? They're using different vehicles, as they talk about the new all-electric Jaguar, or the all-electric Jaguar, with Hyundai they're going to be partnering with. And the big thing is this. The self-driving tech company is no stranger to large-scale partnerships. In 2024, instead of just teaming up with Uber, like I said, I did a video about that, which is crazy that Uber now manage and dispatch Waymo's fleet of fully autonomous vehicles. So you can choose a ride without a driver when embarking on your journey. That's interesting, because I thought, I'm not sure how they're going to do this. Uber employed a new policy when it comes to taxis, that if you order an Uber, you might get a taxi instead, as we think of it like an actual like yellow cab, yellow taxi. I'm curious to see the way they're going to do this on the GUI, or the graphical user interface of the app. Is Uber going to do it where if you order an Uber but a Waymo's closer, they're just going to give you the Waymo anyway? Do you have to go out of your way to pick a Waymo? Is going to be another option on the Uber driver app, as it's like Uber XL, Uber Black, Uber Waymo, or something like that? Tough to say. And this was kind of interesting too. Waymo says it's providing more than 150,000 trips per week. I did not think it was that high, honestly. Now, here in LA, there used to be a wait list, or you have to be invited. Now, anyone could just download the app here in LA and order Waymo. The radius of Waymo is also bigger now. 150,000, though, that is pretty crazy. If we go to this year in review, that, where is it? Is that, yep. 150,000 trips each week. That's insane. We served over 4 million fully autonomous rides this year alone in 2024. 4 million. Just between those 3 cities, that's way more. If it was like countrywide, I feel like, that makes sense. But between only San Francisco, Phoenix, and LA, that's wild. That's absolutely wild, And there has been pushback, right? The company's vehicles have been involved in a handful of high-profile collisions. In addition, there were issues. Let's see. Going down here. It does say that the autonomous Waymo driver technology was about 3.5 times better in avoiding crashes that cause injuries, and 2 times better in avoiding police-reported crashes than human drivers. So Waymo has said that, and I've done a video about that. But there's also another report. I talked about this in a previous video, that people were almost like messing with the Waymo algorithm. And there was one incident of a girl recording that these 2 guys stood in front of the Waymo. So the Waymo was not trying to go around them like a human would, and kept asking this girl for her number, like clearly harassing her and stuff like that. And so Waymo is not perfect, right? Waymo is not perfect, but things are moving very fast. And I gotta say, it's just more and more breadcrumbs. I mean, I have the entire Waymo playlist of all my Waymo videos listed below in the description, and you'll see that the first time I took one was kind of like mind-blowing. It was super trippy, felt super futuristic, and slowly yet surely, Waymo has more and more created more and more waves, more and more attention. In the previous video I just posted on this channel was the Uber CEO saying, yeah, I believe in 10 years we're going to have only self-driving cars. And it does make sense at a certain point, and we're kind of already there from what it seems like. When it comes to Waymo, it is better than a human driver. Yes, there are reports of crashes. Yes, there are reports of people messing with the algorithm. There are reports of people like almost hacking, I put that in quotation marks, the Uber driving system and messing with it and stuff like that. But with that all being said, when you look at the metadata, when you analyze everything, it is true that Waymo is safer than getting an Uber or Lyft. And let's be honest, we're just scratching the surface when it comes to AI. Not just with Waymo, but Suno and Udio in the music space, Gemini, ChatGPT, Bard, and Claude, for example, and like the AI chatting space, if I call it like that, where you can get information. We'll probably all have used ChatGPT at this point, at least I'm assuming. So things with AI are moving very, very fast. And when it comes to Waymo, I know the whole idea of self-driving cars has always been a bit on the radar, for better or for worse, when it comes to a lot of Uber drivers and Lyft drivers. I think for a lot of people, actually, now, AI taking over your job is a big thing. I know for me, which is kind of interesting, when it comes to YouTube, for example, there are people using AI to create YouTube videos. So part of me says, in 10 years, will people even watch my videos? And of course, I think that's a little different than getting a self-driving car, but again, you never know, right? AI is taking over a lot. And there's been a lot of breadcrumbs, like I mentioned, with Waymo, and this is just another big one. The fact that Waymo unveiled and, let anyone download their app, like I mentioned, in LA. Then it got to the point where the radius got bigger here in LA. Then it got to the point where Waymo, for a lot of times, that was actually cheaper sometimes than Uber or Lyft. That to me is the biggest sign. The fact that Waymo, it's not always, but before I used to check Uber, I used to check Lyft when going out. Which one's cheaper? I'll just take the cheaper option, just easier. Sometimes I buy a few cents, sometimes I buy a lot more. Now, though, I add in Uber to that thing. I add Waymo. I go Uber, Lyft, and Waymo, whichever one's cheaper, I get it, because before, Waymo was always more expensive. Now that's not the case. Then Waymo's now driving on the highways. Before, that was not the case. A huge issue with Waymos, in case you didn't know, is you order one or take one, and it takes longer to get to your destination. Now that's not the case. And then, with all this happening, the integration with Uber, as this article pointed out, and I had mentioned before, that you can now get an Uber app or use the Uber app, order a Waymo, or it can be Waymo, it can be an Uber. And the fact that you don't have to get another app, create an account, which is annoying. You have to put your credit card down again. It can be a bit of a hassle, and it's a huge barrier to entry to signing up with a whole new thing or a whole new system. Not the case with Uber. And then lastly, moving into more cities. I just say all this because it's been just more and more like, if I look at like a timeline of only human drivers, and then like say only AI drivers or only self-driving cars, we are slowly, bit by bit, little by little, progressing more and more of having only self-driving cars in the Uber and Lyft space. Now, Uber has pointed out, for all my drivers out there, saying, hey, we're trying to figure out a way to still have our drivers maybe have jobs by doing X, Y, and Z, but there are millions of people who rely on Uber and Lyft when it comes to working. There are millions of people who use Uber and Lyft when it comes to putting food on the table, making ends meet, paying bills, people loving the flexible schedule, the instant cash outs, all these things, all the benefits of Uber and Lyft. Of course, Uber and Lyft is not perfect. I've talked about that in a bajillion videos on this channel, but there's a lot of benefits, and you cannot deny how much Uber and Lyft has changed a lot of people's lives. I will say for me personally, it definitely has, for numerous different reasons, right? But this is, I think, I hate to say it, an unfortunate inevitable. And like I mentioned in literally the past video, by 2035, in about 10 years, it could be, and most likely will be, that it's only self-driving cars. And that, I'm not gonna lie, is a bit of a scary thought. There's only gonna be self-driving cars. And as mentioned in the previous video too, and I think this is a big thing, it's not like it's gonna be like a binary switch. It's not like all of a sudden it's like, boom, now only self-driving cars. It is gonna be a situation that things are slowly gonna transition more and more time than maybe at first, right now, like say 100% human drivers. Then it was maybe 95% human drivers and then 5% AI. Then 93 and 7, right? And eventually it's going to get to the point where it's almost going to be half self-driving cars and half Uber and Lyft drivers, half rideshare drivers. And then eventually, at some point, again, the prediction is in 2035. Maybe it will happen sooner, maybe later. I might even say sooner if I had to guess. if I had to put my money on either one, that eventually will only be self-driving cars. And this is just another step forward towards that. For better or for worse, the future's here. Whether we like it or not, the future's here and it's coming up upon us very fast.